Welcome to ORdio. I'm here with Rachel Meade Smith. Rachel is the editor of OR's newest book, Search Work. Rachel is the curator and writer of Words of Mouth, a newsletter that goes out to thousands, tens of thousands of readers and job searchers and people. Rachel, it's great to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So we're going to talk to you about the process of curating this book and challenges you encountered and some of the themes that come up. It's a very profound and humorous and moving collection of writing. So to start, could you tell us why, you have this newsletter. Why did you decide to put together a book?
So I was thinking about the fact that it was about to be 10 years in a year. I was actually kind of ahead of the game for me, for my standards. I was thinking a year ahead and saying, okay, it's gonna be 10 years next year. How am I going to mark that? It's a big deal for me. I don't think it's as big a deal for the rest of the community, but some people might be excited, but it's a really big deal for me. And I had seen the community grow and the project grow and become a part of people's lives in a way that I had not in any way intended when I started it. And I wanted to think about how to document that in a meaningful way for that 10-year mark. And I thought about an artifact that could kind of outlive, my MailChimp archive and also bring in voices from the community. So I send this newsletter every week, but there's almost 75,000 people now who read it, and they don't get to communicate with each other. They don't get to share their stories with each other, or even with me. They email me sometimes, but I don't really get to talk with people that much about their experience. Over the years I have, but it's not something I get to do very regularly. And I wanted to bring people together, I wanted to share their stories, and I wanted to create an artifact that shared and documented this project in a more permanent way. And I had thought about starting different kinds of projects, like maybe a little writing residency for the newsletter, or a magazine of sorts or something. But I thought, the reason the newsletter has lived for this long is because I've kept it small and I've kept it manageable for me, even though it goes out weekly. If I were to do anything else that would require like a ongoing maintenance, I wouldn't be able to do it. So a book is obviously incredibly difficult to make, but you do it once. So those are some of the reasons why I ended up doing this. And I actually decided to do it pretty quickly. Like it came to me as an idea, and then I think probably within like a week and a half I had already reached out to some of the contributing editors about working on it with me.
I think of job searching as like a destination where you are trying to get your job and hopefully you get it and then you're done. But what you have created is this real community of like a process of continuously looking and trying to find work. But what does it mean to have that kind of ongoing community of something that is typically seen as just like a destination and then you're there?
Well, because it never is over, right? Like maybe I just was with someone yesterday who just got laid off from their job after 7 years. So for her, she hasn't been searching in a while, but here she is again 7 years later, even though she probably would have stayed where she was. So most people, you're going to come back to it again and again. And then I know a lot of people who are kind of doing it all the time. People who are well employed will open the newsletter every week just to see what's out there, to get informed about new organizations, new opportunities, be inspired, use it as a fantasy engine. There's so many reasons people come to the newsletter, even if they're not actively job seeking. And then there are the people who are just always job seeking. So I guess even though we like to think of it as a thing you do that has a finite end, in reality that's very rarely the case, and eventually you come back to it. So I think of it as an ongoing, lifelong process that we engage in. And I think maybe the reason job seeking hasn't gotten the kind of critical inquiry that I wanted to do with this book is because of that. We think of it as something that just takes place in a brief moment and less brief. But you just want it to be done, and then it's done, and then you don't have to think about it anymore. But the reality is that people are thinking about it all the time, even after they get hired, because especially now, because of the layoffs, and there's no sense of real stability or security. Yeah, not like there used to be. So yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's an ongoing part of life.
You, in words of mouth, I mean, as you were saying, like you kept it very small. I mean, that's really your writing and your curation. And what was it like for you to start reaching out to people? And I mean, you edited this book, but it's the writings and drawings and musings of many other people. So what was it like to reach out beyond kind of your own project?
Yeah, I had started to feel really isolated and solitary in my work. I do the newsletter by myself. My other life is as a writer and editor, but I work remotely and freelance, so I'm kind of like outside of the sphere of everyday activity and intimacy of an organization. And so I really wanted, at the start of last year, to open up my practice for the year of 2025. I was like, okay, I want to be really in collaboration with people this year. And that informed not that I was like, otherwise I would have written a book on this myself, but it really informed my eagerness to reach out to so many people and to make this an anthology that inherently just brings so many people together. I've been an editor for a long time, and so I'm used to working with other people's words and language and ideas, but this was definitely a different experience for a lot of reasons. But it's also why I brought on contributing editors. I knew that it was going to be really intensive in the way I wanted to do it, which is like, I knew we'd have to shape this together. I definitely had a strong vision going in, and so I wanted to bring on people who would be able to work with individual authors on the timeline that I wanted, to a depth that I would also want. I knew I couldn't do that myself. So there were two layers of collaboration. There's the layer with the contributing editors, so that was kind of like my brain trust and my team. And then there were the dozens of contributors as well, who I ended up working with all of them, and then I had a portion who I worked with from the beginning. So yeah, I was very excited by the collaboration, and the desire to collaborate shaped the form of the book and obviously the process as well.
I mean, job searching, as we know, runs the risk of just like being so isolating, and you're just on your own applying and kind of in competition with all these people that you don't know. And what I think is so nice about words of mouth is that it's not that many opportunities that you're sharing, but it somehow doesn't feel like you're competing necessarily, or it just feels so intimate. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Like, I'll have these gatherings sometimes where words of mouth readers will come, and I look around and I'm like, you guys are all like applying for the same jobs. Like, you're all like kind of technically each other's competition, obviously depending on what field they're in, but they come to these events and they see other readers and they're immediately like, you're part of a community that I'm a part of. And they feel more like peers. They don't approach each other like competitors at all. They're like, we're doing the same thing at the same time in this shared world, which is becoming more and more dire. So it's more like an alliance. Yeah, it doesn't make logical sense, but it's more of an emotional reaction, I think.
You talked about the world being more dire, and I think everyone feels like it feels that way. And there are ads in here from like 50 years ago, I think from the 70s, about also like looking for work. Is it true? Like, do you really think it's worse now? It's like harder now than it used to be?
Yeah, I do. We have these text collages in the book, and there's a story from my mom in there where she talks about, I don't remember the exact story, I'll have to go reread it, but she basically just like got herself into an office building where the law firm was that she wanted to work at, and she like went upstairs and got a meeting with the guy who he was like, well, I guess if you're here, you might as well come in, have a meeting, sit down. And then he gave her a referral to go meet someone, and then she got a job with him, and it happens within like a period of weeks. So there's so many factors here. There's one is like the formalization of the job, of the hiring process, which is in a lot of ways great, because a lot of that stuff was based on like privilege and access, and a lot of the structures that have been put in place are, to make it more equal and accessible to people. But of course it makes it like increasingly Byzantine, like you have to go through this step and then this step, and then it's going to take way longer, and everybody has to have the same point of entry. And so the more formalized it becomes, the more tedious it becomes, the longer it becomes. And then, the opportunities are just not really there at the moment. Like the market has shrunken, like in a lot of fields. And that's something that we don't know if it's permanent or if it's cyclical, and economists are trying to figure that out right now. It's like, wait, it's always too early to tell. Nobody knows what AI is doing. Nobody knows why there aren't jobs, but there are numbers and there are anecdotes that all point to the same conclusion, which is that yes, it's definitely harder now. there is a subset of people for whom it is absolutely not harder, but it was never going to be hard for those people.
There's an essay in the book by someone who's like reading her mother's cover letters and kind of creating this like collage of the cover letters and trying to kind of understand who her mother was through the cover letters. But the cover letters are just cover letters.
Just generic, nothing.
Yeah. And it has me thinking of like these personas that you're kind of trying to project in order to get a job and give just enough of your like personality. But in the end, like, there's nothing really there.
Yeah, there's a piece by Jordan White, the first piece in the book, where she talks about all the different personas. She doesn't craft them like they're real. They're versions of her where she's emphasizing different things about herself and her interests and her experience. And we've all done this when we've applied for work, like one cover letter for this kind of job, one cover letter for that kind of job. And she's like looking at the different cover letters and being like, which one of these is like the best? And like, are any of these me, or are these all me? And every time we look for work, we have to do that, where we're like putting ourselves on paper with a specific weight and like a specific perspective on the things we've done and the things we want. And we have to write that into a narrative. And then we sit back and we're like, is that true? I just wrote that. Is it true though? And so I always think about like, what mark does that leave on us after we're inhabiting those personas for hours, or if we're interviewing weeks? Do we come out of that process believing that that's who we are? Do we become that person? You know, if we get the job, we either maybe become that person where we realize we're not that person. So these influences that job hunting have on us, we don't really think about them. We don't think about the toll that they're taking and how they're shaping us. And it's not that we should necessarily like want to be impervious to them, because it's just part of life. But I think the more we can be aware of them, the better off we will be, because the impact that work has on us, capitalism, job seeking, like it can work to kind of disassociate ourselves from our true desires and our true, identities to a certain extent, if we're shaping ourselves to the needs of the market in this way.
You talk in a few moments about this process of becoming and how that kind of maps onto this process of searching for work. And then there's also this movement or this idea that like we're all more than our work doesn't define us. But at the same time, like it does kind of in many ways. Can you talk about that maybe contradiction there?
Yeah, it's such a toughie. I have been someone who, in past iterations of myself, have been very excited by the search for work, because it was an opportunity to do something new, to meet new people, to learn about my true desires and try new things. And again, this was like a different time when there were plentiful jobs, and also I was, when you're lower on the totem pole, you can be more open to different things, I guess. I would find that part very exciting, where job hunting was kind of a door into new worlds. And if you stayed in the same place, you were just in the same place. Like you didn't know what was out there. And, over time I've seen how that is kind of a fallacy, because, well, especially as the opportunities, cease to exist. But also it can be incredibly painful at the same time. And it depends on the kind of feedback you're getting. Like if you're going out there and applying all the time and being excited to apply to these new jobs, and then you're not getting any feedback and you're not getting any opportunity, like you don't get to have that experience of becoming. But I still think that there is the opportunity through job seeking, because if you don't look, you don't find. But the process requires so much of us, so it can be really damaging too. So yeah, it's a tension that I can't resolve. I think both things are true, and depending on what's on offer, it might feel like a more enriching activity. Like right now, I don't think it feels particularly enriching or exciting to most people.
For me, the book is also refreshing, because so much of the media that's out there about the job process is kind of like in a self-help form, or like this is how you can improve yourself to then get this position that you really want. And just like taking a step back and like acknowledging that we're all like in this process and it kind of sucks. And then there is like this real humanity in it was just a nice thing thing to be reading.
Glad. Yeah, there's a lot of do this, don't do this. This is what you're doing wrong. And it's like, you know what? Like, also the jobs just aren't there. It's not because you formatted your resume the wrong way.
The book is full of essays, but then also collages and drawings and like all kinds of poems, like just sort of weird little texts, and brings us real like creativity and openness to the process. Can you talk about like how you thought about piecing these like many kind of disparate elements together?
Yeah, so I knew that the words of mouth audience is incredibly multidisciplinary, creative, and it has a lot of writers, but there's also people who are artists who work with multimedia, and I wanted everyone to have an opportunity to express their perspective on this experience in a way that felt true to them. And I also think different formats just allow different ways in. So I thought it would be a richer experience than just having straight essays.
I mean, and it's so many different contributors. How did you kind of create a narrative like that?
We sent out a pitch call that was very open. So it was, I'm making this book on looking for work. Here's a list of, 20 themes that I'm interested in. Here's a list of 15 formats you might consider. Essays, documentation, like screenshots, poems. I didn't really know what I was going to get, so I think I even had like comics on there, and then we got some comics, and I was like, never mind, I don't want comics. So we got 1,100 pitches, and I worked with 2 of my contributing editors to narrow that down. I did the first round where I took it from 1,100 to 500, I think, and then me and Rachel Catter-Nailbuff and Dorothy DeBrule, we worked in essentially like a big Google Doc where we ranked the submissions and we chatted about them and we made keyword. We tried all these different things to kind of filter, and over the course of a couple weeks we got it down. And I knew, for a variety of reasons, including length and also budget, because I did pay contributors, that I couldn't have more than, I think I had initially said 25 and we ended up with 30 in the book. We wanted to choose a diverse selection, so there were the straight text pieces, but then we also have a play. We have a few visual pieces that includes one kind of visual survey of recruitment ads, and then some like interpretation of those from Elizabeth Goodspeed. We have a collage, which you mentioned, which was Katya Rosenberg looking at her mom's cover letter, and she initially was going to make a collage from it, but she was like, oh my God, there's nothing here. So she ended up making a collage about her mom with pictures. But yeah, I wanted it to be just a diverse landscape. So that factored into the selection process. Like, we don't want to have too many of a certain kind. A lot of people proposed blackout poetry from their cover letters and stuff. We didn't end up taking any of those. But yeah, we wanted to feel balanced. It's obviously mostly text, but I think I wanted a reading experience that was like, as you go through, you get like little hits of different vantage points, different formats, and it kind of keeps you engaged in that way. I chose the sequence over the course of the editorial period. So even before things were done, I was starting to figure out where they would go in the book and what the chapters would be. And then I would tweak as we got farther along to make sure that things were sort of well distributed throughout. But I actually had an idea for the chapters like pretty quickly. And they stayed relatively the same, but then which pieces were in each chapter did change a little bit over time.
And your chapters are ghosts, tools, frictions, and threads. Why were those the sort of topics that you, or names that you settled on?
Well, they're vague, so they can hold a lot. Ghosts, so this is the first chapter, and it's about kind of our fracturing subjectivity that I've been talking a little bit about, basically how our identities can deconstruct and reconstruct through the process of looking for work, leaving us with these ghosts of the people who we didn't become or who we met while we were crafting a cover letter. And I actually took the word ghosts, I think, from one of the little snippets in the text collage. I think it's Hallie Pritt's, I think it's their snippet where they talk about, you apply to be this on this day and then a this on this day, and then you're walking around with these ghosts in your head, like these doppelgangers for the rest of your life. They're just like living with you. And so that's where the word ghosts came from. I thought it was just the perfect description for that experience. Tools is, it uses a very tactile word to describe something that is less and less defined. So yes, there's the resume, yes, there's the cover letter, but increasingly there's these different strategies that we now need to use. So there's this piece by Jake Maynard where he talks about how he works as at a plant nursery, and he uses his proximity to rich people at the plant nursery to get jobs as a landscaper. And so he's figured out the way to do it is that you pretend you're essentially like a bohemian and you're poor by choice, and then they don't resent you for being poor, and they see you as one of them, or they see themselves as a patron of the arts if they're hiring you. So he's crafted this. This is like his toolkit. So it's stories like that.
In that case, you also have to know the person. You're playing them a little bit too. It's not just like presenting yourself. It's also knowing how they relate to you.
Yeah, no, it's very it's like psychological strategy. Yeah. Yeah. And then Frictions is about, there were so many pitches from people who were talking about being kept out of industries, kept out of the process, experiencing bias and prejudice in the process. So there's just some of those stories collected in this chapter, and it's really about like coming up against like a force field when you're looking for work. And what I found to be pretty consistent throughout that is this idea of disclosure, like what can I say and what do I have to hide? And they're just constantly deciding through this process of seeking work, do I tell them that I need visa sponsorship? Do I tell them that I have epilepsy? When do I tell them? How do I tell them? Like, what can I say on the other side of that comment to kind of like ease their anxiety? Yeah, it's all about like, what do we share of ourselves and what do we keep? And then the final chapter, Threads, is about how job seeking works to kind of connect us with each other, with history, with the future. It's probably the most open of all the chapters, but it has the most hope in it because there's this idea that this is a continuum. We've been here before, we'll be here again, and like if we're looking for work, like there is a future that we're looking towards, but also how we can learn about ourselves and our families and history through job seeking, whereas that is not how job seeking is typically considered. It kind of opens it up to, it becomes more valuable. Like it's a terrible thing that we have to go through for a lot of people, but we can also use it as a tool to actually uncover some really interesting things.
Yeah, I think like being reflective about this process in itself, like then you can find some growth or some...
Yeah, it just... Yeah. Makes it a little bit like feels more worth it when you can see it in that light.
You've been thinking pretty exhaustively about this process for at least 10 years. Were there elements or like perspectives that came up in the process of editing this that surprised you or that you hadn't thought about before?
Well, I think just hearing from so many people just through the pitch process alone, like I said, I got 1,100 pitches and I read through all of them. And so I haven't talked to that many people over the last 10 years about this experience. So just the like vastness was, I guess it wasn't surprising because that's what I was hoping for, but just like really having to sit with it was really, I found it very overwhelming in a way I didn't anticipate. I actually had to stop reading the pitches at night because I wouldn't be able to sleep. And I will say that's because so many of them were like very dark. I guess it's not surprising that a lot of the people who submitted pitches were feeling pretty desperate because this was kind of it's like, oh my God, somebody's asking about this experience that I'm going through right now that's like ruining my life. Like, yeah, I'll submit something. And I think those are the ones that were kind of like typed in like a state that they were in and sent off in the middle of the night or something. It was a lot to take all of that in. Another reason I was glad that I brought on contributing editors to work with everyone because people deal with a lot when they go through this, and we all basically just kind of weather it ourselves and we don't externalize it because for so many reasons, but there's so much stigma with job hunting, and I think a lot of these stories people had not shared with anyone, and people were just so grateful to be asked, that people were talking about it, that this was going to be in a book that people would read, that this was a meaningful story, because it feels so heavy when it's happening to you, but it's like nobody wants to talk about your job search, unless it's like your parent, and then you don't want to talk about it with them. There were so many different kinds of stories, and I think I wasn't necessarily surprised by any specific one. I was very moved by lots of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a deeply emotional process that everyone goes through, and I think reading some of the essays or even listening to the open mic that you had at Pioneer Works in the summer, like you kind of empathize with everyone, but I can only imagine that it's also like a lot to process that and take in. How did you decide which ones to bring into the book and which not to?
It was arduous. There were so many good ones. We didn't ask for a writing sample. And what I realized later is that we probably should have, because I ended up using the pitch as a writing sample because I was like, we are making a book here. Like, it can't just be the best story. It has to be well written or well expressed. I think the first trim down was, there was a lot of stuff where I was like, this just isn't going to work. And so I'd say maybe like a quarter of them, I could kind of just say like, no. And then there were just a lot of ones that were very dark, where there wasn't any kind of hook. They were relatable in ways that I think people wouldn't feel necessarily like catharsis relating to. There had to be something interesting, unique, memorable about the story, or the situation was like, yeah, particularly distinct. Like there's a story we have by Megumi Kawai about applying for work as a new graduate in Japan, and it's just this incredibly formalized, like institutionalized process that every single person goes through, where you have to go to these seminars, you have to wear a specific kind of outfit, suit, you have to dye your hair if it's not already completely black, you have to take a personality test, you have to write these very specific, they're called entry sheets, where it's just like outlining your whole history and everything in a very specific way, like way more rigid and uniform than anything that I had heard of. And I was like, this is wild. I had no idea that this existed. And, you know, apparently this is an entire graduating class in the entire country is going through this every single year, and has for like generations. That was just like, I guess that was a surprise. Like that was an example of something that I just didn't, a side of this that I just didn't know existed. And I was like, we have to include this. And then there were just some really beautifully written descriptions of like not particularly distinctive experiences, but I was like, this is going to be a beautiful piece. It just took a lot of work reading through everything and thinking about how they all fit together to create a book that would be true and like representative of like diverse experiences without leaning in too much towards, you know, false hope or optimism, but also without dragging people through the mud and being like, God, isn't this a terrible process? Like, do you want to read this whole book about how shitty job seeking is? Like, that wasn't our goal either. So it was about balance and, yeah, just like richness, wanting to imbue this subject with a richness that it does not typically have.
You've talked a few times about formalization and how job employment is kind of, or at least that process is becoming more formalized. But at the same time, it seems that a lot of this work is becoming more and more freelance, which is kind of the opposite of that in some ways. Do you see that kind of develop, or what's your assessment of how things are going?
Well, there are fewer and fewer good full-time jobs with benefits and stability. And in place of those, we're seeing more and more precarious contract jobs, because you don't have to pay your workers benefits, you don't have to give them any kind of security, you don't have to invest in their professional development. So these are often marketed as being flexible, allowing you the freedom to pursue other things. And I mean, I've been a freelancer for the last 6.5 years, and I will say I've loved it because I have had the flexibility to live my life in the way I've wanted. I haven't had to go to an office. I've managed my own time, blah, 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 all the things we love to talk about with freelance. But I also have had very respectful employers. I've been really lucky. I've had contracts that were better contracts than I ever had as a full-time. You don't have a contract as a full-time employee. So I had more job security as a freelancer. Not often the case. It kind of depends who you are, where you're looking. But yes, increasingly people are seeing opportunities that are not going to pay their full, you know, rent, utilities, childcare, whatever. They're going to have to cobble together multiple ones and make those all fit. You know, you can make a good living that way, but it's a lot more work to do. And sometimes people just want an employer who's going to, you know, pay them the wage they need and their benefits. And I'm seeing fewer and fewer of those jobs. I'm seeing a lot of jobs that I'm surprised are part-time. I saw a job today. I'm working on the newsletter, which goes out tonight. It's a senior book jacket designer at Harvard University Press, and it's part-time. It's 21 hours a week, and I'm like, what? I've never seen a job like that at a university press that's part-time. Like that's, and I don't know why it's part-time. I don't know if it's, specific to a project, but it's bizarre, and it seems to be like of a kind with other trends that I'm seeing towards just increasingly precarious employment. But yeah, I think there are definitely benefits to having, control over your own schedule, but it's for a certain kind of worker. Like those jobs are benefiting people who have been more established in their careers, who know that if they go freelance, they will know what to charge for their work. They will know that they can work without direct supervision. Like you can't do that as an entry-level grad. And I see a lot of people who are younger and younger being like, oh, I'm just going to go freelance. It's like, I was able to go freelance because I had worked full time for a while, and I knew, I didn't even really know. I was ready, and it was still hard to know what to charge and what to do, when someone says like, you're in charge of this project now, and like, you don't really have any coworkers, you don't have a manager. So
you don't have like a mentor who's like,
you don't have,
invested in
it's
you.
hard to be vulnerable, it's hard to ask for help. So I feel for younger people who are being told like, well, you can just go freelance because those are the opportunities that are available to you. So yeah, that's one of the trends that's happening right now.
It seems like it can't really go on like this. Like, it's not just in kind of creative work, but
Yeah.
if like tech companies are hiring more advanced people and then they're not investing in young people, like,
yeah, what happens when those people
yeah,
retire? There's no one below them. I don't know. It's really a strange moment. The economists are all being very hesitant to make any proclamations like, AI is taking the jobs, or this is permanent, or this is going to reverse. Like, we don't know if this is a cyclical change where, the labor market is contracting and people are saying it's, a correction from overhiring during COVID. It's like, we don't really know if that's the case. It seems unlikely that that's what this is. It seems far more likely that, the economy and the Trump administration's policies, the tariffs, all of that is making all of the, hiring bodies hesitant, scared, spending less money. There's also the question of AI. People are like, it's not AI that's taking away the jobs, there are just fewer jobs. I'm like, okay, but why are there fewer jobs? Is it because of AI? Like, we don't know. And we don't know if it's gonna be that in 3 years or 6 months, companies realize like, oh, actually we should hire humans back, or actually no, like we need even fewer humans. Like, we don't know which direction it's going. We're really in this wait and see moment, it seems. But people are still, there's this narrative that's happening, and this is where it affects job seekers beyond the fact that there's fewer job openings and fewer job postings and stuff like that. There's a narrative that like, AI is coming for your jobs. It's the worst hiring market for new grads, since the recession, and all of these like really scary headlines that are making people feel even more desperate, which leads to, obviously like high levels of anxiety, but also feeling like you have to take whatever job is given to you, even if it's really poorly paid, or if you're in a bad work environment, it's super toxic, or you're, not taken care of. I think you have to stay, so workers have less freedom to make the choices that serve them. So there are all of these, downstream effects of these scary narratives that are playing out right now.
You touched on like personality tests, and I'm curious what you think of the kind of technologies of job hiring. You mentioned AI as well, but where you just have these like really deep assessments of kind of everything about you. And like when I came out of college, like it didn't seem like you had to pass through like 6 interviews to get a job. And just thinking of like traditionally how you kind of present yourself through this like persona, and that's how that they hire the persona a bit, and it seems like more and more they're really getting to like the core of your humanity.
They want to, but like, yeah. Is that ever something you're gonna give in the interview process? Like, yeah, how many interviews do they have to do to get to know who you really are? Probably there couldn't be enough. For most people who are feeling like they have to show up in a certain way in that process. Yeah, it begs the question, like, how do we ever show up as ourselves at work, like even after we're hired? But I think, yeah, there does seem to be like more and more of a desire to just like make the right choice, like make sure this person is the right fit culturally and, obviously skills and everything. but I don't know why that is. It might be because so much money goes into hiring and they don't want to make the wrong decision. I think it's funny. I see a lot of language now in job descriptions that's like, even if you don't match all of these qualifications, we encourage you to apply anyway. And I'm like, shut up. Like, why waste my time? Why encourage me when I know there's going to be 100 other people who are actually qualified for this role and meet all of the qualifications or overqualified? Like, you're still going to consider my little application, you know, when I'm like, I've only done this for 2 years instead of 6. I don't know what that is. I think that might be like a gesture towards inclusivity, but in the end, I think it's probably like harming people more than it's helping, because people are spending their time applying for things that they're never going to hear back from. The advice used to be like, apply for anything. Like, if you're not applying, you'll never get anything. Like, you have to just like blanket the market with your application, your resume. And I could not disagree more. I say, like, only apply for things you have a really good shot at. Unless you know someone there who's willing to really vouch for you, and maybe then you'll have a shot of getting an interview. Even in the case where you're really qualified, you still usually need to know someone, just because so many people are applying now. So I say, like, do not waste your time on things that you are not qualified for. And, you know, then there's the question of like, well, what if you're not qualified for anything? Like, what if you're just starting out? And that's where knowing people is like the only thing that's gonna really help you.
And what about like applying for jobs that that are not really your dream job?
I know.
Not to go down the advice route, but
yeah. Well, no, because this goes back to like what happens when you're writing these cover letters and imagining yourself in these jobs that you don't want. I mean, I think this is just something most of us have to do. Like, we have to consider taking jobs that we don't want because we have to pay for things. Like, unfortunately, that's just what we have to do. And that's where I think understanding the toll that the process can take on us can be helpful. Like, maybe if we know, I haven't tested this, but maybe if we're aware of it, we can, you know, put up a little bit of a wall and say, like, I'm just applying for this job. I don't have to be, you know, the dog food salesperson in my soul, but that is what I have to maybe be right now to make money. I think it's really hard to keep our jobs from influencing how we feel about ourselves. So, you know, that can be a challenge even when we really like our jobs. But when we don't like our jobs, so we're having to get ourselves hyped up to apply to be, you know, the dog food salesperson, then yeah, that can leave a mark. Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's just going to be the reality for so many people, is that you have to apply for jobs you don't want, and frankly, you probably won't hear back from those either a lot of the time. Yeah, I think applying for the jobs, if you have the privilege of time, if you can spend your time only on applying for jobs that you both want and are, you know, likely to get a call for, or maybe not want, but like would take the interview, would be like semi-excited to take the interview, I think that's what you should spend your time on. At least that's what I try to do.
Has the process of putting together this book made you think differently about how you're going to go back to, or how you continue with Words of Mouth?
Yeah, I think I want to find a way to keep bringing people together. We had an event here at the Francis Kite Club a couple weeks ago, and it was so wonderful to have people in the room together. And I've had some, you know, events over the last year and in the past years, and every time I do, it's, you know, it's exhausting, but it's also just incredible to be a steward of this community and helping people find some kind of just like release or sense of togetherness or connection through this process that can be so grueling. My dream right now is to have like a physical space where it can be kind of like a clubhouse for people who are looking for work, the un and unhappily employed, because and it's New York City. I don't think that's going to be a reality anytime soon. Yeah,
dream big.
Yeah, but I'm dreaming big. I think it's just it's so important to bring people together, and it's not that that's going to help people find jobs more quickly. Maybe there'll be a connection that's made, but that's not really the point. It's not like a networking event that I have in my head. It's just letting people like complain together and lift each other up and be like, oh, it's okay to talk about that here. Because I think a lot of people don't want to talk about it with their friends or their family. They don't want to bore them, or they don't want to embarrass themselves. People feel very ashamed even admitting that they're doing it. So it's just a space where they can like show up in the way that they want to with this process. And like you said, it's such a isolating process. It can be very atomizing. You can feel like it's you against everybody else. But if you're all like coming together and being like, I'm showing up for you, you're showing up for me, I'm here because you're here, I think that can put a different color on it.
I think going back to that idea that you've talked about it, I mean, really being a process, and like if it's a lifelong process that you're kind of continuously going through, what can we do to make that process actually not miserable, you know, and not always just be waiting for the end to come of finding the job or something. Like maybe just being in community can make it a little better. But.
Yeah, like this is something we have to live with, so we might as well like put up some nice curtains or something. And
have like, coffee or something.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Anything else you want to add?
Buy the book. Buy the book.
Hot off the presses.
Yeah. There's a lot in there, something for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And thank you.